This day in sports history. Hey there, and welcome back to This Day in Sports History. I'm your host, Steve White. This dish is a member of the Sports History Network. You can go to sportshistorynetwork.com and find more great podcasts and more info. That again is sportshistorynetwork.com. It's October 7th, and this seems to be a day throughout sports history when some big numbers grew on scoreboards. I've got the Green Bay Packers putting up big numbers in 15 minutes, the most points ever scored in a college football game, and I've got a boneheaded coaching decision that led to some unwanted numbers going up on the scoreboard. But let's start with what happened on this day in 1950. When 12 members of the Czechoslovakian National Hockey Team were put on trial for espionage and treason. So the first thing to know is that after World War II, Czechoslovakia fell into the hands of the communists following a coup, and it became part of the Eastern Bloc. In 1948, a Czech hockey club made up of players from the national team went on the road and won the Spengler Cup. Well, after the tournament, several players defected to the West. Former hockey national team member turned tennis pro Jaroslav Drobny defected in 1949 when he traveled to Switzerland for a tennis tournament. Well, those defections were embarrassing to the communist regime. Now, the 1949 Czech team had won the World Championships, and they were looking forward to defending their title in 1950 when the tournament was going to be held in London. But they were never allowed to leave the country. They were denied boarding their plane at the airport and told that two journalists traveling with the team had their visas denied by the UK. The following day, the team met in a pub in Prague to talk about the situation. And while they were there, a news report came over the radio talking about how the team would not be defending their championship in solidarity with the two journalists who had apparently had their visas denied. Now, everybody on the team knew that that was a bogus reason. They all knew that the communist government feared that the team would defect once the tournament got started. Well, at that point, the players' frustrations spilled over, and they started yelling and cussing about how horrible their government was being. Reports quickly trickled back to the Czech secret police, and they came and arrested the 12 players. They brought them in for questioning, and that questioning turned into torture. The secret police had learned also of discussions between team members of plans to defect once they had arrived in England. They were all labeled as being anti-state and charged with espionage and treason, and they went on trial on this day 75 years ago. Now, the trial was nothing but a sham. 12 players were tried, and all 12 were convicted with sentences ranging from 8 months to 15 years. But this wasn't wasting away in a jail cell kind of sentence. Instead, these guys were sent to work in the uranium mines. And one of the players said many years later that where they were sent was notorious as one of the worst places of communist oppression, a work camp extracting uranium which was used for the Soviet military in conditions without any safeguards whatsoever. They wore no masks. They breathed uranium dust fully into their lungs. Aside from the trumped-up charges, there are some historians who believe the entire farce was perpetrated by the Soviet government as a means to take the best team in the world off the market so that their new Soviet team could be more competitive with the rest of the world. Many players returned to playing hockey once their prison sentence expired, but none were ever allowed to play on the national team again. On this day in 1945, the Green Bay Packers rolled up the most points by an NFL team in one quarter. Now, about a week ago, I revisited the Detroit Lions' 34-point fourth-quarter outburst in 2007, and then the Indianapolis Colts scoring 21 in the final 5 minutes of a game against Tampa Bay in 2003. So there has been some history of teams putting up big numbers in a hurry in the NFL. Well, this one didn't have the dramatics of erasing a huge deficit in the final quarter, though. Instead, the Packers did all their damage in the second quarter, and they did it in front of their home crowd at Wisconsin State Fair Park. Side note, in case you were wondering, Lambeau Field did not exist yet. It was still 12 years away from opening up, but the guy it's named after, Curly Lambeau, was the coach and general manager of the Packers here in 1945, and he would be through the 1949 season. Well, this was week 2 of the 45 season, and Don Hutson was a thoroughbred, anxious to break out of the gate. This would be his final season of a Hall of Fame career, and this was one of his finest games. The Lions got the scoring started in this one, putting a touchdown on the board in the early moments of the second quarter, and then it was time for Hutson to run. First, the Packer receiver reeled in a 57-yard touchdown pass for a score. He called a 46-yarder for a touchdown a few minutes later, and then added a 17-yard TD reception and finished off with a 6-yard TD reception. Sprinkled in between those was a 41-yard touchdown pass and catch to Clyde Goodnight and a 69-yard interception return for a score by Ted Fritsch. Oh, and Hutson also handled the place-kicking duties, and he went 5 for 6 on extra points, and they did all of that in one quarter. When the quarter ended, the Packers jogged to the locker room with a comfortable 41-7 lead. The 41-point second quarter explosion is still the NFL record, though it is shared now. The 1950 LA Rams rolled up 41 in a quarter, also, interestingly enough, against Detroit. Hutson scored 29 of those 41 points. His 29 and a quarter is the most by an NFL player in 15 minutes, and he was in a good spot to beat Ernie Nevers' record for most points scored by one player in an NFL game. But Hutson did not play in the second half and only came in to kick 2 extra points in what turned out to be a 57-21 Packers romp. So from that offensive explosion to another one that happened on this day, and this is probably one that you have some passing knowledge of. On this day in 1916, the Ramblin' Wreck of Georgia Tech rolled up 222 points in a football game against Cumberland College. Well, I guess I should call them the engineers of Georgia Tech. The original Ramblin' Wreck was a 1916 Model T, but it was just starting to be driven around campus when this game happened. Not quite a Ramblin' Wreck of a car just yet. They would not really assume the name Ramblin' Wreck until 1927. But Georgia Tech coach John Heisman did prefer to call his team the Yellow Jackets, dating back to 1905. Okay. So back to the game, and maybe the biggest question about this one is, how did this game get out of hand and be completely one-sided? Well, first, Cumberland had disbanded their football team the year before, but had signed a contract to play this game, and so they were obligated to play it. Heisman actually threatened legal action if Cumberland did not make the trip. So, the team was made up of a few members of the baseball team, some fraternity brothers of one of those guys, and then they recruited some other guys from the law school to fill out the roster for enough players to play in this one, in case they needed to litigate a call on the field or take a contradictory debate position. Second, Cumberland's baseball team had ripped Georgia Tech 22-0 in the spring of 1916. Tech's baseball coach at that time was also John Heisman, and he had a little axe to grind against the Bulldogs athletics program. Cumberland was on the receiving end of the opening kickoff, and their day would get no better from there. They did not pick up a first down, and they punted it away, and then the scoreboard started rolling up points like cherries on a slot machine. Tech scored 63 in the first quarter, added another 63 in the second to lead 126-0 at the break. Now, you would think that would be enough. Take the foot off the accelerator of the Model T and just let things kind of wind themselves down in the second half, right? But, of course, it did not. At halftime, Heisman put his players on notice, supposedly saying, "You're doing all right, team. We're ahead, but you just can't tell what those Cumberland players have up their sleeves. They may spring a surprise. Be alert, man. Hit 'em clean, but hit 'em hard." Now, one concession Heisman did make in the second half was to shorten the quarters from 15 minutes down to 12 minutes. But even with the shortened quarters, Tech added another 96 points. So, some fun facts from this one. Cumberland never gained enough yardage for a first down. Most of their plays lost yards. They did have a 10-yard gainer at one point, but they were so deep into the hole yardage-wise, it was not enough for a first. Georgia Tech scored on every possession, so if you did the math already, that's 32 touchdowns. They also never threw a pass in the game, and they ran 3 less plays than the Bulldogs. Cumberland turned the ball over 15 times, 9 fumbles and 6 interceptions. So without a doubt, this is one of those records that will never be broken. No team has come close, and of course, why would you even try? But a lot of teams have scored more than 100 in a game. The last time that happened was in 2003 when the Division III Rockford Regents beat the Trinity Bible College Lions 103-0. How about a stunner of a different variety for Georgia Tech on this day in 2023? And this one is less about the number of points and more about the horrible decision by a college football coach that led to points. This was 17th ranked and 4-0 Miami versus unranked and 2-3 Georgia Tech. It had been a good close game, but Miami had the 20-17 lead, and with 2 minutes to play, the Canes picked up a first down. Well, at that point, Tech had one timeout left. They burned it after the first down play. The clock stopped with 1:18 remaining. With a 40-second play clock in college football, if you do the math, that's 78 seconds. Divide that by 2, that's 39. At this point, you snap it on second down, take a knee, let the play clock run all the way down to 1 second left, snap for third down, take 2 steps back, and then take another knee, and the clock's going to run out. Game over. Well, apparently, Miami did not do the math. On 3rd and 10 with the clock rolling at 34 seconds, Miami ran a play instead.
Just take a knee, like you should not be handing this football off. I don't know what Miami is doing.
That's it. And here's Cheney, just straight ahead, tackled, and the ball popped out.
You got to read the clock. Read the card. To me,
Georgia Tech has it with 26 seconds left.
That was Miami's 4th turnover of the game, and without a doubt, their most crucial one. Georgia Tech ran a few plays, and with 10 seconds remaining, the Jackets stung the Canes. Here's Wes Durham with the call for the ACC Network.
Receivers to the top of the screen. Here's King from the pocket. Flush to his right with 6. 5. Going to loop it downfield. And ball is caught. Touchdown, Georgia Tech. With 1 second to go in the ball game, Christian Leary hauls it in.
A stunning win for Georgia Tech and a boneheaded loss for Miami. Now, this loss may have been responsible for Miami's tailspin on the back end of their season. They ended up losing 5 of their last 8 games, including a 31-24 loss to Rutgers in the Pinstripe Bowl. Hey, real quick, you've heard me talk a lot about the Sterling Soap Company over the past few months, and if you haven't tried out their soaps, I get it. It's not easy changing up your routine. But let me just say, if you give them a try, I'm nearly 100% certain you will have 0 regrets. They carry not only bar soap, but shave soap, liquid body soap, body lotions, beard balm, lip balm, and a lot more. Plus, there are myriad scents to choose from. Their products are made with natural ingredients and scented oils, and they are committed to being environmentally conscious. And I always get a handwritten note on my packing slip, so I know it's been checked before shipping, and it's a nice little human touch in a world that seems to be going away from that. Give Sterling Soap a try today at sterlingsoap.com. How about another number-rolling performance from this day? On this day in 2017, Arizona's Khalil Tate and Colorado's Philip Lindsay were like 2 High Plains gunslingers dueling it out in Boulder. Although instead of hitting each other, they just kept firing away and seemed like they had endless bullets in the chamber. The thing is, Khalil Tate wasn't even supposed to be playing in this game. He was at the tail end of a rehab stint from a shoulder injury. Now, he looked healthy enough in pregame warm-ups, but he was still the number 2 QB on the depth chart. However, an injury to Brandon Dawkins on the Wildcats' opening possession sent Tate looking for his helmet. Arizona coach Rich Rodriguez is a guy who recruits and likes to utilize dual-threat quarterbacks. He worked with a few at West Virginia, and he had one with Tate, and so he decided to let him loose. Tate rushed just 14 times in this game, but he racked up an amazing 327 yards on the ground. That is an average of more than 23 yards a carry. He also scored 4 times. His 327 yards rushing is the most by any quarterback at the FBS level in a game. When Colorado had the football, it was QB Philip Lindsay's show. Lindsay carried the football 41 times for 281 yards. Compared to Tate's numbers, that was a pedestrian 7 yards a carry. He also scored 3 times. So that is 608 yards rushing between the opposing QBs, which also set an FBS record. With 5 minutes 4 seconds to play in this one, Lindsay scored on an 11-yard run to make it a 3-point game at 45-42. Arizona was able to convert a crucial third down on their next drive, and then when Tate broke free for a 31-yard gainer, it was enough for the Wildcats to run out the clock and put an end to one of the most impressive quarterback duels in college football in recent memory. And on this day in 2007, the single-bar face mask made its final appearance in the NFL. The generically named Scott player punted 5 times in a game between his Cleveland Browns and the New England Patriots. Now, he was averaging 46 yards a punt so far through the season, but apparently that was not good enough. Cleveland cut player from the team after this game, and he never signed with another one. The NFL had outlawed the single bar in 2004, but allowed those still using it to keep wearing it until the last of the lot retired. And time now for your favorite part of the show, the That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. There was a brief period in the playing card industry when there were 65 cards in a deck, which included a 5th suit. The cards were introduced in the 1930s, and the 5th suit was eagles. The card sets did not do so well, though, and they were discontinued. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.